And we are live. Welcome, mystery and thriller fans, to your brand new Mystery and Thriller Maven 2022 author series. We're kicking off tonight with true crime. I'm here for it. I know you are too. Happy New Year. Let's get into it. I am thrilled to host David Bushman tonight, here to give us the inside scoop on his 6-year research into a real-life true crime, the unsolved murder that inspired Twin Peaks, the cult hit series TV show. David, welcome to Mystery and Thriller Mavens. Tell us about this book.
Thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. And you hit the nail on the head. It was 6 years in the making. Researching and writing. Mark Givens, who co-wrote the book with me, and I both got into it through our, I don't want to say obsession, but our love for Twin Peaks. And we both had heard independently, Mark and I didn't even know each other before this started. So we had heard independently that Mark Frost, who's one of the co-creators of Twin Peaks with David Lynch, had said a couple of times in a couple of different places that his inspiration for creating the arc that sort of triggered this series, the murder of Laura Palmer, was influenced by a story that his grandmother used to tell him when he was a kid. And all he had said was that it was a woman named Hazel Gray, he thought, and that it was upstate New York. So I was writing a book for Hal Leonard called Twin Peaks FAQ. And I came across the statement, and I spent a lot of time researching it. It turns out that there was no Hazel Gray murdered in upstate New York around the turn of the century, which is what Mark had said. And so, but I was able to track it down to a woman named Hazel Drew. And it was in Sand Lake, which was near Troy, not far from Albany, the state capital. And then Mark separately had a podcast, and he was kind of on a parallel path, because I guess we both love Twin Peaks and we both love true crime. So I reached out to Mark and said, would you be interested in, Mark Givens that is, and would you be interested in working on this book, a book on this together? And he said, yeah, and that sort of launched us on our path.
Well, I want to hear all about the path because I am so here for it. I love true crime. And I know there are so many people who love Twin Peaks. Hello to the Peace Corps. I was like the Pie Corps. The Peace Corps is giving us books and love emojis. Welcome, watching from YouTube. So I just want to take a moment and welcome everyone who's watching from YouTube, watching from Facebook, watching on my channels, Murder by the Book channels, our private Facebook group for mystery and thriller lovers. Wherever you are, you're in the right place, and this is the right time. So let's get down into it. If you've been here before, you know how it works. And if you're new, we're so happy to have you. Here's how it works. Every Monday, I give you my hand-picked featured authors, and you get to ask them anything. This is your time to ask David anything. Ask him about his research process. How did he research this murder that's over 100 years old? The girl turns up murdered in the pond. Next thing you know, Twin Peaks is taking it and running with it. I need to know all the details, and I know you do too. So get them going in the comments, and David will answer them. I want to welcome Casey, Yvonne, Dawn, Allie, Sue, Susan, Rebecca, Irma, Gail, and Leslie joining us from Canada. She's giving us a Canadian hello. Top Mystery and Thriller Maven member there. Great to have you as always, Leslie. So, David, let's start at the beginning with the fact of a body. So you're chilling out, you're watching Twin Peaks, you love it. Who doesn't? I do. And then you start to realize that Mark Frost, the co-creator of the hit TV show, tells you that this is a true story. A girl turned up dead in a pond. Then you partner with your writing partner and you research it. I mean, did you divide it up? He does the writing, you do the research, you both are out at the pond researching. I mean, walk us through this process.
It was pretty much it was pretty much we both did a lot of everything. I think we have different strengths which sort of complement each other, so that was good. Like Mark really is into, I mean, we were both into research, but he could go down a rabbit hole and spend like a long time there, and I sort of come from a newspaper background, so I'm more like well, we have to get this done. We have to get this done. So that was kind of that was a good compliment. But we both did a lot of the writing. We both did a lot of the research. We must have gone up there, I'm going to say 10 times. We met some amazing people up there who helped us so much, mostly Mark Marshall, who just lives on the property in Postenkill, where the foundation of the church that Hazel's family attended is still there. So he felt this kind of strange bond. And Mark probably won't like you, Mark Marshall. There's a lot of Marks involved here, but Mark Marshall probably won't like you that I'm telling you this, but I think at some point along the way he became so into this. He was so helpful to us, such a great guy. But he actually, I don't know if he was kidding or not, but he would tell us that Hazel was talking to him. So I'm not sure if he wants me to share that with you, but it's out of the bag now. In any event, so he's lived up there his whole life. He knows so much stuff. Bob Moore, who's the town historian, was so helpful. And then we met people like Kathy Sheehan, who's the Rensselaer County historian, and Don Rittner, who's written so many books about the Troy area, who just knew so much. And Bob Moore used to set up, was really cool. He would set up these roundtables where Mark Givens and I would go up there and we'd sit around this table and you'd have like 6, 7 people from the area who had heard stories about this for decades, or in some cases even were ancestors of people who were tangentially involved. And the coolest thing was we met relatives of the woman who Hazel Drew spent her last weekend alive with in Schenectady. And they didn't know about this. They didn't know that until after the relative died. So they never had the chance to ask her what Hazel talked to them about that weekend, which would have been like an invaluable thing to know, because when the day after Hazel came back from that trip, out of the blue, she quit her job, and nobody was apparently expecting that. So something was going on in Hazel's mind, and we can only sort of guess what it is. But we came that close, to having some that was kind of the story of a lot of the research. This close, but not quite, So, I mean, we did, obviously get a lot of stuff, but it's tough when things are so tantalizingly close. And then they, like, I think the other story I tell is that we were looking for coroner reports. And we went to the county clerk's office, and he goes, oh, we don't have anything from there, but I'll send someone down to take a look. And they come back with this box, and he dumps it on the table in front of us. And we're thinking, I'm sure there's nothing from 1908 here. And we're looking through it, and we start to see reports from like the late 1800s, but nothing from 1908. So it was that kind of stuff that was just this incredible journey. That was just so, and meanwhile, while we're doing this, like, there's an insurrection going on, an election, and COVID, and it was just so, it was kind of blissful to find yourself, to escape into this other world, of 1908 and upstate New York, and it was just like taking this imaginary journey that was just so blissful in a way.
Oh, yes. And I know that the bliss of the rabbit hole delights of going down that research rabbit hole. I know it well, and I'm totally here for it. Linda, welcome to the conversation. She said, this is all so intriguing. Linda, I totally agree. Thanks for chiming in, and let us know if you have any questions. I see a question here from Kaylee. She says, hello from Minneapolis. Hi, Kaylee. She said she'd like to know, are any of Hazel's relatives still living? And did you talk to them? Yeah, because Hazel comes from a very large family. Give us the skinny on that, David.
Well, distant relatives, but not anyone. I mean, Hazel never had, she died at 20, so she never had any family, and her sisters and brothers didn't either. So there was nobody that was sort of part of that nuclear family. But the closest we came was that brother and sister who I talked about, Roger and Pat, who were related to her cousin, who were descendants of her cousin. That was as close as we got. But Kaylee, I should also mention to you that Mark Frost, who co-created Twin Peaks and was the inspiration for us for the story, and wrote the forward to the book, um, spent a lot of years of his youth in formative years in Minneapolis. So there's a connection for you that you might not be aware of. So there is a connection to Minneapolis.
Very cool. Polly, welcome to the conversation. And she is saying that she is a fan of Twin Peaks. Me too. And it is so fascinating. I mean, to know that Laura Palmer, this gorgeous, there's so much that's similar and there's so much that's different. So Laura Palmer washes up on the shore, Hazel Drew found in the pond. Both known for being extraordinarily beautiful young women, and both had a secret life. So tell us a little bit about, which we start to see in your book as we learn that Hazel is a domestic worker. She's a household help. She works in household help. And yet she makes $4.50 a week, and yet she can afford these. She's known for her incredibly beautiful custom made dresses, her beautiful hats, her beautiful shoes, her jewelry. How's a girl who works as in domestic service able to afford all of this? And that sort of hooks us into a whole other side of Hazel. Tell us about that, David.
Yeah, I mean, the more we dug into it, the more we were finding these apparent contradictions. She had a very close friend who was a governess at another house on the same street named Carrie Weaver, who traveled with Hazel not that long before her death to New York City. And Carrie made, the comparative amount of money, which, as you said, was $4.50. And she herself said that, I mean, this was somebody who was really close to Hazel, and they saw each other a lot and talked a lot. And she herself said she couldn't understand how Hazel could have dressed the way she did and traveled the way she did and eaten at the restaurants that she would eat at. But so that was one secret, but there were so many. I mean, so many people described Hazel as this quiet young woman who didn't have any male gentleman callers, I guess you'd call them, who didn't really have a very active social life, who liked to go to church, whose idea of a perfect night would be curling up by the fireplace with a book, which you and I can both appreciate. But then, like, they would find a trunk filled with letters to and from male admirers, and they're just her Aunt Minnie. At one point, word had leaked that Hazel and Minnie were seen. Her Aunt Minnie was like 20 years older, a very persnickety, strange, idiosyncratic woman who was just difficult beyond belief. But word had leaked out that she and Hazel had gone riding with two gentlemen, just again days before the murder, and she refused to tell police who they were. In fact, she refused to tell police the names even of any of Hazel's friends. And when reporters asked her why, she would always bark at reporters, but she barked at them, and she said, I don't want to get any good girls in trouble. They're good girls. I don't want to get them in trouble. And the question that, you sort of get so frustrated because you want the reporters to say, how is releasing the name of Hazel's friends going to get them in trouble? Like, what does that mean? Is there something that Hazel was doing or that you were doing or that they were doing that would get them in trouble? But you can't ask those questions. And unfortunately, those questions weren't asked. But Hazel had, and also Hazel came from unlike Laura, Hazel came from a very modest rural upbringing. She leaves home at 14 to go to work and find a job in Troy, and winds up in the house working for one of the most powerful people in the city. And she had two subsequent employers, both also very powerful men. The first one was the city treasurer. The second one was a very wealthy coal merchant. Coal was a big thing back then, and he had actually run for mayor. And the third one was the city engineer. So all three of them were powerful people active in Republican Party politics. And how does Hazel wind up in that circle? we have our theories, but we don't really know how she wound up there. And two of those three were involved in scandals involving public funds while Hazel was working there. Hazel left her second employer, the coal merchant, in December before she died, so it would have been 1907. So she went to visit. So she left the employer without a job and went to stay with her brother and sister-in-law at her uncle's farm in the woods in Sand Lake. And many people said during the course of the investigation that she did that because she was ill.
Mm-hmm.
People would say to them, well, ill how? What was wrong with her? And everyone would say they didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd say, did you call the doctor? No, they didn't call the doctor. Why didn't you know what was wrong with her? Well, we never asked her. It was stuff like that. So there was this one reporter who was following the case, was a guy by the name of William Clemens, who claimed falsely, as it turns out, which is something that we discovered during the course of our research, that he claimed falsely to be related to Mark Twain or Samuel Longhorn Clemens, and it was a lie. And the reason I know that is because I reached out to one of Twain's biographers who said that he had come across a letter by Twain calling this guy like a parasite. But this guy clearly was insinuating that Hazel, the illness, the quote unquote illness that Hazel had, was a pregnancy, and that whether she aborted the child or whether she had the child and gave it up for adoption or whether she miscarried, he didn't say. But that's like a kind of like a sample of some of the mysteries that were popping up along the way. There's more too, but I mean, I'd say, like, one or two of the biggest are where was Hazel? So Hazel was murdered on a Tuesday night, last seen at 7:30 p.m. Nobody knows where she was on Monday night. She had left her job. Nobody knows where she was on Monday night. Nobody knows where she was on Tuesday night or Tuesday afternoon and evening up until she was seen at 7:30. Nobody knows why she was at Teal's Pond. Nobody knows how she got to Teal's Pond. She had left her suitcase in the train station in Troy, so she obviously was going back that night. Nobody knows how she was getting back unless she was meeting somebody there who was going to give her a ride. Again, she was murdered on Tuesday. The body was discovered on Saturday or Sunday. Nobody in the family reported her missing all that time. So tons of mysteries.
Tons of mysteries wrapped in enigmas, wrapped in mysteries. The levels keep going. Ooh, question from Ms. Vixen, who clearly is a true crime buff herself. Welcome to the conversation. She's asking, did Hazel have an affair with her employer? If so, why she quit? Oh my gosh, what a great question. And as I read this book, that never occurred to me. So I love that insight and that investigative mindset. David, thoughts?
Well, I sort of don't want to give away too much, but it's certainly a great question, and it's one that we spent a lot of time trying to track down. So, it's a very natural question, and it would have explained it would have explained some things. If it did happen, it would explain some things. Let me put it to you that way. She wasn't, people were not, either she wasn't open about her relationships and who those people were, or whoever it was she did trust with them, and they were withholding information. So there's a lot, we don't I don't want to again give away too much, but it's a great question. It's possible.
Well, I like where your mind's at, Ms. Vixen. Clearly, you are good with the investigative questions. Let us know if you're available for consulting. This could be useful. David, Publishers Weekly awarded you a starred review. Congratulations on that. Raving in this taut true crime page turner, the authors effectively summarize 5 years of research utilizing a range of sources and paint a convincing picture of events that make readers feel like they're experiencing developments in real time. This account will hold appeal beyond David Lynch fans. Congratulations on that wonderful praise. I'm going to pop it up for just a second because it will cover our heads. But I like that thoroughness, and I'm putting it in the comments for everyone to be able to read in their own time. Let's talk about, I like how they said taught. So, I see a good question coming in from Kathy. I'll get to you next, Kathy. Taught. So, in order to compress 5 years of research into something that is compulsively readable, and taught, did you utilize your newspaper background in that? Or, I mean, what do you think the secret is to taking what surely must have been a huge amount and writing it into a taught thriller?
This is a really interesting question, especially for writers out there like yourself, because as I mentioned to you, and as you mentioned, my background is, I was a television curator at the Paley Center for Media for 27 years, but before that, I was a reporter. And when Mark Givens and I first sat down to write this book, it looked pretty different from the way it does now. And we were working with a company that was called at the time Metabook and has since changed its name to Synergistic. And a guy there named Ken Simon, who was really encouraging us to write this. He was using the term creative nonfiction. So he was saying to us, don't be afraid to, like, if you know this. So if you're interested in writing, this was kind of really eye-opening for me because I had only written journalism. So he said, if you know that the district attorney met with his chief detective on a certain day, and you know that what came out of that meeting or what they discussed at that meeting and how it was decided, but obviously you weren't in the room and the reporters weren't in the room. As long as you're faithful to the gist of what happened, don't be afraid to use your imagination. So there are times when we, used our creative juices to invent dialogue. Really, it's really just mostly dialogue, I guess, where that happens. And we had to, go out of our comfort zone and approach it from a much more novelistic viewpoint. And, it was a challenge. But I think once we got the hang of it, we became more comfortable with it. And I think that, it speaks a lot to the point that you're making about the readability of the book. And I'm really glad Ken made that suggestion to us.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that sneak peek. Kathy is wondering if perhaps Hazel was meeting a wife or significant other of one of those high-ranking officials. David, first of all, great question, Kathy, as always. Thank you for chiming in. David, thoughts?
So I'm assuming that Kathy means that they had found out about some relationship and that's why they would have been meeting. Again, definitely a possibility. They were all powerful people. They all had Republican Party connections. The guy who led the investigation, the DA, was a Republican and another powerful person in that party. Mark Givens, my co-writer, and I used to sort of have this. One of the things when you're co-writing with somebody is you don't agree on everything you don't agree on everything. And there were so many unanswered questions in this investigation that my conclusion was that they were either incredibly stupid or incredibly corrupt, that there was no other possibility. And if they were incredibly corrupt, they would have been protecting somebody. And so does that raise the possibility that it could have been the wife or girlfriend of one of those employers? Definitely.
Interesting. Well, thank you for the great question, Kathy. I always appreciate your questions. And David, thanks for the skinny on that. Welcome, Colleen. Making sure I didn't miss anybody. Welcome, Craig. Welcome, Jerry. Welcome, Liz. John, Karen, Edie, Wendy, I'm making sure I hope I'm not missing anybody. Linda, Colette, welcome everybody. Great to have you here. Let's keep the conversation going. David, another review that I really appreciated that your book has earned is from Booklist. Booklist says the story is fascinating and the added historical details add depth. Those interested in true crime, especially of an archival nature, will relish this. I love historical details as well. Like I like to know those sorts of things. So the information that you wove in about the town, about the time, about working options for women, all of these things were really fascinating, and I loved the textual details that it added. Let's talk about what you just referenced, that you and Mark didn't always agree. What were some of the disagreements? Was it about those details? Was it about something else? Give us your most tense moment. Did it ever come to blows?
No, but
You you
we
pick
were,
up your computer, you just start bashing him.
well, he was in Washington and I was in New York, so it might have otherwise. But Mark and I are good friends. Liz Pearson's Liz Pearson, our editor at Thomas and Mercer, would really encouraged us to paint as immersive a picture as possible by using those details. And we had there, a lot of different sources. I mentioned two earlier were Don Rittner and Kathy Sheehan, who are and Bob Moore, who are historians and know a lot about what the area was like in those times. But the other interesting thing is, when we spent so much time in the Troy Library, and again, some of this was during COVID, and I remember that there was a time where they, I would spend like 8 hours in that library a day, and they had closed the men's room because of COVID. So it was like really uncomfortable. But you start off going, you start off looking at this 2-week period, at the newspapers in this 2-week period. And then you realize that you have to go way beyond that, because she went to a parade in the park up in Rensselaer County on July 4th, which was before this murder happened. And we found this great article that told us so much about what that parade was like. It was a local paper, and there's stuff that would never make a paper today, like every little detail that you could possibly not even care about, but it all added flavor to it, and to what the park was like that day. We had to look into the temperatures and the weather. And I remember Kathy and Don spent a lot of time talking to us about what downtown Troy, which is now, it's pretty economically depressed right now. And they've been through urban renewal which destroyed so much of the history of the city, including the incredible train station that Hazel spends so much time at. The old red light district that Meme Fay, one of the most famous madams in history, worked out of, because that train station was a central stop for people going north, south, and so on. So much of it was gone, but they helped us, concoct these pictures in our head. So it was all research. And then, Mark and I, like I said, we spent, a lot of time up there walking around, and, walking around the pond, which was where the murder took place, and the downtown area. And, you'd start to picture in your head from these descriptions that these people, and we also had, there's some great books that are just picture books, photograph books from 100-year-old photos that Bob Moore led us to. And so the historians were like really, really, really helpful.
And Yeah, this is so great. Linda is wondering, back to the disagreements between the co-writers, what do you do if you don't agree? If you think you should have ended the book one way and Mark says you should have ended it another way, you think you should have had more details about the parade, he only wanted it to be a paragraph. I mean, how do you actually do that? Linda, great question.
It is a great question. And uh I guess, it's kind of like being married, Linda. If you can't, you have to sort of pick your battles, and the things that are really important to you, you go to the mat for, and the things that you're willing to compromise on, you compromise on. I would definitely say the biggest disagreement we had was about the investigator. And I'd be really curious to know how you all feel that we came down on him, which way what your impressions are of him after you read the book. I mean, Mark thought that, Mark, I think, had more confidence in this guy than I did. So it'd be interesting to see what you all think. Um, but you pick your battles, you compromise on the ones that are not essential to you, and you go to the mat for the ones that are.
I love that. Wise words, sage wisdom for both marriage and co-writing. So thank you for that, Linda. Great question. Um, so, David, you live in New York with your dog, who you named after Agent Dale, Special Agent, FBI Agent Dale Cooper from Twin Peaks.
Yeah.
Tell us about Dale the dog. Why did you name him after Dale Cooper? And was your wife on board with that? Speaking of marriage.
So my wife dislikes scary things, even to the point where, again, she probably won't like me saying this, but she had nightmares after Ghostbusters, to give you some sense of how easily she's influenced. So she was not a big Twin Peaks fan, but I worked at Variety, um, which is covers TV and film and um, theater and music, and when they were bringing Twin Peaks to TV, and there were so many stories because, first of all, it was at a time when broadcast television was under attack from cable, which was starting to branch off into original programming. So they were losing a lot of their audience. Believe it or not, VCRs were an issue then, for those of you who can remember that. So, networks were sort of desperate to try something different. And it was this huge news within my world, the variety world, when David Lynch was coming to TV. But the strange thing was that there was this dichotomy within ABC where the creative people were really excited about it and the suits were really nervous about it. And so what happened was ABC held on to it for a really long time without giving it an air date. And David Lynch and Mark Frost started to make the rounds at places like the Paley Center, or the DGA, to screen it, have screenings, and try to get word of mouth to force ABC to put it on the air, which eventually worked. So I had this whole history with Twin Peaks. Then I really loved the show. Then I worked at the Museum of TV and Radio, which became the Paley Center, and I wrote a book about Twin Peaks. So, and actually, I wrote two books about Twin Peaks because I also wrote one with Mark Frost. So I had this whole history with it. There's really nothing. I don't even think my wife knew at the time that where I got the name from, but the dog is not the dog is strange like Cooper, but probably not in the same ways.
Does the dog like pie, and does he hang upside down from the ceiling? um, I the Peace Corps is saying she cannot wait to read this. Yay! Thank you so much, y'all. The book is available for pre-order. Grab your copy tonight from Murder by the Book. I am plopping the link into the comments, so you can just click right over, click order, and you too can read along and then continue the conversation with us over in the Mystery and Thriller Mavens Facebook group, where we dish about our favorite reads, free and open to all. So grab your copy of the book, read it, and let us know, what do you think of the portrayal of the investigator? What do you think happened to Hazel? Well, what happened to her? Well, who do you think was behind the murder? Let us know. David, another thing that I wanted to talk about is, so well, first of all, what are you working on next?
So I don't know, have you ever heard of this movie called The Place Beyond the Pines? It was
Yes.
so Ryan Gosling was in it, and Bradley
Yes.
Cooper was
Yes.
in it, and
Yeah.
Ava Green, even not Ava Green, Ava Mendez, and I think I'm leaving somebody out, but I don't know who it is. So this was about a the writer, the writer of it and the director's wife both lived in Schenectady in upstate New York. And one day when I took a train up to Albany. There's no more train station in Troy. They tore it down as part of urban renewal. It's this beautiful old train station that Hazel spent so much time at. But so I took the train to Albany, from New York City to Albany. And then I was going to go to the airport to pick up my rental car to drive around Rensselaer for the weekend. And I get a lift. This driver picks me up and he starts talking to me like, what are you doing up here? And I tell him, and he goes, oh, that's interesting. We have slightly different recollections of this, but he said, I used to be police chief of Schenectady. And I said, really? So, he started talking very openly about this. And it turns out that he was police chief of Schenectady at a time when they were under FBI investigation. 4 of the policemen went to jail, and he did not until many years later. After his retirement, he did some time for cocaine possession. So he's telling me all this, and I'm thinking, this would be a great story. Then it turns out this is really that The Place Beyond the Pines is very loosely based on what happened. So my next book is about what really happened. So there's that. And then, just to sort of, again, I tell you this as a writer, for some reason, some guy reached out to me a couple of weeks ago and said that his uncle had just done 24 years in prison for some drug thing. And I looked him up, and he was part of this Albanian connection, they called it. So I'm supposed to have lunch with him because I'm sort of really interested. They want to do a book. So as long as it's not a book about how he was like wrongly accused and all of that, because nobody's going to be interested in that. But if there's some insights into how it was run and stuff like that, I'd be interested in doing that. So those are kind of two. The Schenectady book is written, and then the other one I'm just looking into.
Fab. Ooh, well, we love to hear it first here on Mystery and Thriller Maven. So thank you so much. We have time for just about 1 or 2 more questions. So get them going in the comments. Anybody, this is your time to talk to David Bushman about his work, his book. Get anything you want to ask him. Get it going. David, another great review. I'm going to pop this up very briefly because it's long, but in the literary equivalent of an archaeological dig, authors Bushman and Givens unearthed the details of a sensational murder mystery that gripped the nation in 1908 and inspired the sinister cult favorite Twin Peaks. Now with Murder at Teal's Pond, the real characters emerge in a drama that proves to be every bit as darkly compelling as the TV classic, if not more so. That is what I love about nonfiction, is when you read a fiction book, the burden on the author is to make an imaginary world believable. But when you write nonfiction, you can lean into the ludicrous, because if someone says, oh, that would never happen, you can say, oh, but it did. So what do you think that balance is? Do you just do you put pedal to the metal, lean all the way in? Do you try to balance it and not make it too crazy? I mean, how does that work, do you think?
Well, it was amazing to us how crazy this was. I mean, the deeper we got into it, the more craziness we
Real crazy.
cross. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then like we sort of take this detour in one chapter into the Mimi Killian murder, which was another murder up there that involves some of the same investigators. And you have this weird stuff like about the brother of the victim like threatening to shoot the police chief on the steps outside it was like City Hall or the police station. And it just got weirder and weirder. And because I don't have a lot of experience writing true crime, I don't know. It struck me, I think, and Mark, that this was like just exceptionally weird. I mean, we came across stories that the papers reported that there was um, these this gang of stranglers who would um, bring women to Albany to become like escorts. It just got, Sarah, it just got so weird that you're absolutely right. If I was writing fiction, I don't think I would have gone with. I don't think I would have found the stuff that happens at all believable, and I think I would have not gone that way. But this was just such a weird story. And again, the deeper we got into, I mean, we learned about, we were trying to look into the woods up in Taperton where her body was found, and we discovered that the APA, which was this virulent anti-Catholic hate group, was just a hate group that many politicians were affiliated with. Had meetings in the caves up there. There's just like one totally bizarre. They discovered they discovered a camp that was supposedly a place where orgies were being held, not far at all from the pond where
Oh,
she died.
yes, the orgy camp of Troy, New York, the infamous orgy camp. Oh my God, this is hilarious and very weird.
And
Oh,
supposedly, like, a woman heard screams coming from the camp that night, and just totally off the wall craziness.
off the wall craziness. Leslie saying, I love Twin Peaks. Just watched it again this summer past. Can't wait to read your book. Leslie, thank you as always for the comment and for joining us. I appreciate that so much. Kathy would like to know, David, as you're doing your research, how do you go about deciding what information is fact in the case write-up and what is conjecture and the thoughts of the officer or reporter? Great technical question, Kathy. Thank you for that. David, over to
That
you.
is a terrific question, Kathy, especially because the newspaper reports were so many of them contradicted one another that you would read this piece of information and go, finally, I know what happened, and then you'd pick up like the next paper and it said something completely different. So it was really, really, really hard. And I think what happens, Kathy, is that over time you get to a sense of what papers become more reliable than, and which become this was the height of yellow journalism too. So which of them were more interested in promoting themselves than getting to the truth of it. And so like if we read something in the New York Times, for example, we gave it more credence than we did. And this is a point that I made in another interview too. There's a scene in The Exorcist where, talking about William Clemens now and what to believe and not believe, this sort of ridiculously over the top tabloid reporter. And it would be easy if you could just say, don't believe anything that he wrote. But there's a scene in The Exorcist where the older priest, played by Max von Sydow, and the younger priest, played by Jason Miller, are going in to the house to meet Reagan, the possessed girl, for the first time. And the old priest, who has all this experience interacting with the devil, says to Jason Miller, beware the devil. I'm paraphrasing. And Jason Miller goes, why? Because he lies? And Max von Sydow goes, no, because he mixes lies with truth. And the point being that it's easy to just dismiss someone as a liar, but when they throw some truths in there, then that's when it becomes really difficult to know what to believe or not to believe. And that was that's a big problem. That was a big problem for us. But we did when we couldn't, when we ultimately couldn't decide who was telling the truth, we presented both sides and sort of, said, well, some paper said this and some paper said that. But Kathy, it was frustrating.
It was frustrating, but you did a great job of it.
Thank you.
We are out of time, y'all. Thank you so much for joining us. David Bushman giving us the inside scoop on murder at Teal's Pond. And I just put the link in the comments one more time. So grab your copy of the book tonight and then join the Facebook group and let us know what you think of it. We will be waiting to hear. David, thank you so much for giving us the skinny, giving us the behind the scenes. This has been absolutely fascinating. And we can't wait to have you back when your next book is out.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah, and everybody who was listening and watching. And I'm on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me with your thoughts. I'd love to hear them.
Ooh.
Thank you so much again, Sarah. Thank you. It was really great.
My pleasure. Well, we look forward to having you back again. And y'all, I'll be back at the top of the hour with award-winning bestselling author Allison Brennan here to give us the scoop on her brand new book, The Sorority Murder. I'll see you in 15 minutes. Thanks again, David. Have a great night.
You too. Bye-bye.